Including furniture in 3D architectural prints? What could possibly go wrong? Design teams often create complex numerical models with the kind of rich attribution needed to address multiple design questions. And the renderings and reports which results are a key input to decision making. But what if we wanted to bring some 3D prints of our proposed design changes to a meeting? Theoretically, everything, including the kitchen sink, has already been defined. The software to convert this into instructions for a 3D printer, well, that's available. And our workflow often gets us something to walk into the design meeting with. We covered this workflow in a previous video. However, if the current project includes furniture designed for, say, visual renderings, we don't want the hassle of ripping out all of that stuff to print. What are our chances of actually getting something to take to the meeting? Well, yeah, as you can see from the image, I got there in the end. Oh, but it took quite a few iterations. Lots of test prints. I had to redesign some of the furniture entities in the CAD program, as well as tweak print settings. Now, I make these videos using software and hardware that I'm familiar with. ESPR for the simulations, Blender for interactive explorations, and Radiance for visual images and lighting simulation. I use wavefront files as a neutral format between these agents. And I print on a Prusa Mark IV's, and I use their slicing software. Now, before you turn off this video, because you use a different CAD tool, a different file format, a different manufacturer for your printer or slicer, look, changing any or all of those things probably will only have a marginal impact on the challenge inherent in creating architectural prints. Assuming you would like your architectural printing workflow to involve fewer iterations than I went through, stick around for the video. The first trick of the trade is to consider scale. In a typical empty building print, one might choose a scale to ensure the facade details are clearly delineated. If we carry on with our usual print scale, will furniture actually be recognizable? Could we actually print it? Are these tiny features going to break even if we handle the model carefully? In that open plan office, wow, there's an awful lot of detail there. If we tried to print something like 30 or 40 meters wide to get the spatial relationships, what impact would that have on the actual size of, say, desks and chairs? Here's an office chair at various scales printed out. The smallest, well, it's barely recognizable and it's horribly fragile. And let's take one of the most ubiquitous items in the world, an IKEA Billy bookcase. Again, various scales of this. It gets a bit better as we get a bit bigger. If we turn our attention to, say, something like monitors that sit on top of the desk, well, the tiny ones are not recognizable at all. Have a look at this table for recommendations of feature sizes. Having selected an appropriate scale, if we just hit the print button, what emerges may not actually be something we want to take into a meeting. In this case, I stopped a print because, well, it was clearly a rat's nest. It would have taken ages to clean up, and I would probably have damaged it in the process. Let's redesign the office chair to be printable. First, we need to increase the size of the casters and the cross-section members and the seat post. We need a transition between the seat post and the seat so that it gets rid of the overhang risk. And a similar exercise for a typical office table. We need to move the legs out to the corners so there are no overhangs. We need to add a structure around the edge and beef up the legs of the table so that they're less likely to break during printing. So, how do you know what might need to be adapted in your model? Well, the printer slicing application is a great place to start. Look for unforced overhangs. Look for spindly legs. What you don't notice in the preview will likely topple over during the actual print. Rather than waste time on a failed print, think laterally. Turn on automatic supports in the slicer and see what it considers to be at risk. Could you tweak some elements of the model to mitigate these risks? And if you do redesign some entities, consider testing them out in a constrained environment, either as solo entities or within a small test room. Having redesigned some of the problematic elements of the building, let's see how it prints. Take a deep breath. Get your updated model into Blender as a preview tool. Take your time. Look closely. Unhide some of the walls to see better inside. Remember, correcting an issue noticed in Blender is way faster than doing it after a failed print. Before you create the STO file, be sure to set the correct scale to avoid having to tweak this in the slicer. Other things you might include in the slicing is to use variable Z heights to get the best resolution with the fewest clock ticks. In this test print, I wanted to see better inside, so I also cut the model at an angle to partially open the ceiling. Then I manually painted on locations to support the overhang. I declined to add any supports to the inside. Actually, probably would have been better if I'd added a few organic supports to help with the ceiling cutoff. Next, I checked the prediction about how much time it would take to print it, and just before I did that, I decided to do a quick scale up to see how much time the next size up of print would take. Well, that was almost 3 times longer, so I decided against that. What follows is what I saw as the print progressed. I paid particular attention as the edge structure of the office tables was laid down. That might have been a classic failure point, but it managed nicely. At the end of the printing, I found only I had a minor bit of cleanup needed. So, with a well-designed model, furniture printed in place can work. But what about using pre-printed furniture and gluing it in place? That's a valid choice if the building and the furniture are the same scale, or if you want to try out different layouts for space planning. A word of warning, however, if you're trying to print at a fine scale like 1 to 100, attaching tiny bits of furniture is going to be really finicky. Some other tricks of the trade. If you're separately printing furniture, it's often much more productive to use sequential printing of the items. This reduces stringing. And if one piece of furniture faults, you've got the option to cancel just that one item rather than losing the entire collection. Also, take the time to explore alternative orientations for printing. For example, the Billy bookcase, printing it flat rather than vertical, reduces the risk of bridging snags. And rotating a table by 90 degrees and adding supports for the legs might just give a cleaner set of surfaces. Lastly, if you're anticipating printing at a larger scale, you might also consider increasing the resolution of the furniture. For example, to reflect the variety of stuff on shelves. I hope this exploration of workflow for including furniture in architectural prints saves you time and allows for a richer set of presentation formats for your design ideas.